It's time to sit back, relax, and listen to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life will inspire, motivate, and empower you. Live your best life now. Listen, learn, think, and decide. Change your attitude, change your life. And now, here's your host, Joan Herman.
Welcome to Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life. I'm Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in. Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life brings you interviews with some of the most inspirational and influential people in the world. It's our goal to educate and empower you so you can live your best life now. Thank you for taking time for yourself, and thank you for letting us be a part of your life. We have another great show for you today. According to today's guest, Neale Donald Walsch, ordinary humans can adopt certain behaviors that have the ability to change the course of the world for the better. He's here today to present contrast between how we live and how an awakened being would act. Neale is the author of 9 books in the Conversations with God series, which have sold over 10 million copies in 37 languages. He's one of the major authors and is a leader in a new spirituality movement. Neale's new book is Conversations with God, Book 4, Awaken the Species. Welcome, Neale. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. That was a very sweet introduction, and I appreciate all those nice words. Thank you very much. Lovely to be here.
Well, it is actually a privilege for me to have you here because your Conversations with God book series, it's changed the lives of so many people. So tell us about that journey. How did that begin for you?
Well, you know, Joan, I had reached a point in my life when nothing was making any sense anymore. In fact, it was worse than it wasn't making any sense. It was actually damaging me. That is, the way I was living my life and the way I was experiencing life was simply, just to put it in simple language, just not any fun anymore. And I woke up one day realizing that, and I thought, gosh, you know, what does it take to make life work? And what have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? I mean, somebody tell me the rules. I'll play. Just give me the rule book, you know. And by the way, after you give me the rule book, don't change them, because what I also noticed is that the rules were changing from time to time.
Right.
So I literally woke up in the middle of the night a number of years ago, now around 20 years ago, and I found a yellow legal pad on the coffee table in front of me, and I began writing a very angry letter to God with those questions in it. And then I heard a voice over my right shoulder. Neale, do you really want answers to all of these questions, or are you just venting? I turned around. Of course, there was no one there, and I thought, well, great. Now I'm not on top of being angry. I'm going out of my mind. But what I noticed was that I was filled with a sense of peace and some kind of serenity, inner serenity, that I had not really experienced before. So I thought, well, all right, just relax and just let yourself just be quiet for a minute and see what's going on. And then I felt or experienced, if I could put it that way, that voice moving inside of my head, in which case I said to myself, you know, I really would like answers to all those questions if you've got them. And I was given answers to those questions and to many other questions that I never dreamt existed. I wound up really in an experience that I like to call taking dictation. And I wound up taking dictation, and I wound up asking many other questions that the answers that I received to those earlier ones would bring up for me. How can that be true? I don't believe that. What about this? What about that? Before I knew it, I had several hundred pages of handwritten information. Now, I want to just add one thing before I stop. I never imagined that this would become a book. I did not write it as a book. I did not intend for it to be read by anybody else. As far as I was concerned, it was middle-of-the-night personal journaling that anyone might do in their diary or in their journal. But it said in the dialogue, this will one day become a book. And you know what? I said to myself, wait a minute. That's measurable. I mean, that's a measurable outcome. The rest of it was theoretical, conceptual, but here's a flat-out statement. This will one day become a book. And, of course, I realized the chances of an unpublished author who no one has ever heard of sending it to a publisher, and the publisher is saying, hey, we'll rush this to print immediately. This man's talking to God. And the chances of that were 1 in a million. So I went ahead on a dare. I just daring God, we'll see about that. And I sent it to a publisher. But in fact, they found the information fascinating enough to say, well, fact or fiction, we're going to put this book out. And it wound up selling a couple of million copies.
Neale, how were you able to discern the voice of God? Because I believe God speaks to all of us, but I think we don't listen. And if we hear that voice, I know for myself, I then think, is it me? Is it God? You know, what is it? How are we able to tell when we are in conversation with God?
It's a very wonderful question, and it's answered on page 5 of 3,000 pages of dialogue. It's the very first question I asked, of course.
Mm-hmm.
And I was told that, and by the way, you're right, the books all indicate that God is speaking to all of us all the time. The question is not to whom is God speaking, the question is who's listening. And the answer to your question, how do we know the difference, is that God's voice is the voice that speaks always with no fear. It is a voice of fearlessness, joy, peace, love, and enormous self-appreciation, the voice that speaks to us of who we really are. And so it's often difficult to hear that voice because we find it hard to, we do think it's our own thoughts. Of course I would think that about myself, but God invites us to speak and to think of ourselves in the highest and grandest way, and then to turn around and see life and others in that exact way as well. So how I tell the difference is if the voice has any sense of fear or doubt or negativity whatsoever in it, I just dismiss it. But if it's a voice of love and joy and fearlessness and happiness and the wonderment of who I am, I listen to it carefully and I go with it, whatever the source. I've come to understand, of course, that the source that I call God is an aspect of the highest wisdom that lives within me and within all of us, that God lives within every single human being. And that's what I understand to be true.
Neale, there's something that's going on in our world today. You can almost feel it. There's this awakening. And so many people are telling me that they're trying to go in deeper. They're trying to bring more of God or a higher power, whatever you call it, into their life. And in some areas, it's working and things are happening for the better, but they can't seem to make it work across the board in all areas of their life. What do you think is happening? Why do you believe they're unable to manifest what they want across the board?
Well, those are two separate questions. One with regard to what is happening. It's my understanding and my awareness that we are undergoing what has been described to me as the overhaul of humanity. Now, an overhaul does not mean a complete destruction of humanity. It's like when one overhauls an engine, one overhauls one's car engine, not to destroy it, but in fact to make it more efficient than ever. But in order to do that, sometimes we have to take the whole thing apart and put it back together again, maybe add some new parts and so forth. So we call that an overhaul when we overhaul an engine. This is overhauling the engine, if you please, of life on Earth itself. So what's going on right now is the overhaul of humanity. That is, we are taking it apart, and we can see that things are falling apart one element at a time, but we will put them back together in a brand new way that allows us to express and to experience who we really are, why we really came here, and the true purpose and the true function of life for all of humanity. Now, why, with regard to your second question, why don't people find it possible to manifest or to produce in their life the outcomes of the experiences across the board, even though they may do so in certain areas, but across the board that they would like to? The answer is that, in my experience, the answer is that, number one, they may not believe fully that they can. Number two, they may not be in harmony. That is, their desires may not be in harmony with the real purpose and agenda of their soul. That is, the soul, we are three-part beings in my understanding, body, mind, and spirit, not just body and mind, but body, mind, and soul. And the soul, I believe, has an agenda that has very little to do with the agenda of the body and the mind. And the body and the mind really are tools, in my understanding, used by the soul to move forward its agenda. But most people have not really understood the agenda of the soul, so they imagine that they're here to serve the agenda of their body and their mind. Many, many people think that life is about, basically, when you get right down to it, a simple paragraph. Get the guy, get the girl, get the car, get the job. Get the house, get the spouse, get the kids, get the grandkids, get the better car, get the better job, get the better spouse, get the better spouse, get the better spouse, get the better job, get the office in the corner, get the name on the door, get the name across the top of the building, and then finally get the retirement watch, get the sickness, and get the hell out. And that's basically it. They see their lives in that way, and they aren't really clear that they're here on a spiritual journey and that they're here for a spiritual purpose having nothing to do with any of that. One of the things that has been said to me is that 98% of the world's people are spending 98% of their time on things that don't matter. Mm-hmm. That's the answer to your question, my understanding at least, the answer to your question, why don't people find it possible to manifest everything they wish to manifest? Because they're spending 98% of their time on things that don't matter.
So when things flow easily, that's when we're in alignment with our soul.
I believe so, mm-hmm. Yes. But the question becomes how to become or how to get into alignment with our soul. And the answer is that we use our mind to cross over from the mind's domain to the soul's domain to find out really what the soul is up to, what the soul is after, and what the soul is seeking to experience in this particular lifetime. There's actually an article that I've written rather extensively. It's called The Pathway to the Soul, and It's available on my website.
And I think sometimes in manifesting, to just take that a little bit further, we hear people that use the language of I need or I want. That's very common language, and that's not the appropriate language to use, is it?
Not in my understanding, because the universe, if you please, is a Xerox machine. It copies everything that we put out there, and the more earnestly we feel it, the more vividly it recreates and duplicates that thought. So if my thought is, I want more money in my life, darn it, or I want a better relationship in my life, or I want this, or I need that, the universe says, yes, that's true, because God has only one word in her vocabulary. The word is yes. She says yes to whatever we have to say. So if I'm out here saying, I want more money in my life, or I want my perfect partner, I'm tired of being alone, God says, yes, that's true. That's true, and that's true. So God says yes to everything we think, say, and do. Now, when we understand that the universe is a duplicating machine, that it duplicates our most sincerely and powerfully held thoughts, we start changing the way we're thinking. I'm not the first person to say this, for goodness sake. It's been said by spiritual masters and authors for years and years and decades. But now we begin to understand why we don't want to walk around saying, I want this or I want that, because God says, yes, that's true.
And you mentioned money, and I saw a video that you created about the flow of money and why it flows abundantly to some and not so much to others. And in it, you stated that money is not something we receive for what we do. It's what we receive for what we are. And I thought that was just such a great statement, because I think we spend so much time using that trade of time for money that we forget it's more about who we are as a human being. And that's when we get the rewards.
It's not only more about that, it's all about that. You can have two lawyers on the same street in the same office building, actually. Well, one of those office buildings where there are a lot of law firms, and one lawyer is making more money than he knows what to do with, and the other lawyer can't find his third client in a year because of the way they are being through the process of what they are doing. This is true of lawyers, plumbers, doctors, and landscapers, or any housewives, anyone. It's what you are being that people are attracted to, and what causes them to actually give you money to be that with them. The example I use is, in fact, a plumber who came into our house about 6 or 7 years ago. Now we had a major leak in our kitchen, and it was just before, obviously it always happens that way, just before a major event we were going to have in our house, where we were inviting a lot of people to come on over, and this leak sprung. So we called this man, and we said, look, I know you're busy, plumbers are always busy, but we got this event coming up in 2 days. Could you possibly come over? He said, I'll put you at the top of my list tomorrow. I don't have an opening tomorrow, but I can start a couple of hours earlier. Can you be up at 7:30? I'll come by if you're able. I said, fine. He came up at 7:30 to our house. He walked in, but not only was he effective and efficient in what he was doing, but the way he was being while he was there. I understand, this is a problem. Don't worry, we'll get it solved one way or another. If I have to come back after work today and work late tonight, we'll get it solved. Not a thing to worry about. And I said, yeah, but and I said, we'll pay you anything, overtime, time and a half. He said, look, I'm not going to charge you an arm and a leg to do this. I understand emergencies. This is what I'm here for, and don't worry about it. And then he asked us other questions as well while he was under the sink. He was talking about, where are you guys from, and what do you do, and tell me about this and all about that. And he told us about himself. He was the friendliest, nicest, most compassionate, caring person I had met in a long time. And when he was done with that work, I looked at him and I said, you know what? I'm going to recommend you to every single person I know. Mm-hmm. I'm sure that guy has more work than he knows what to do with, not because he's a good plumber, but because he's a good person.
The book is Conversations with God, Book 4, Awaken the Species by Neale Donald Walsch. If you would like to get more information about Neale and his work, you can visit cwgconnect.com. That's cwgconnect.com. Neale, in our final moments, from all of your work and your experience and the people you've met and the stories that you've heard and your conversations with God, if you could sum up the body of what you've learned over the years, what are one or two of the most important behaviors that people exhibit that hold us down, and what would a more awakened person do?
Well, I think the poor behavior is that we see what is so and we don't do what works. A person who's awakened, an awakened species, would see what is so and they would do what works. I'll give you an example to illustrate what I mean. We know that what is so is that if we want a life without violence, that violence to solve violence does not work, yet we do it anyway. We try to use violence to end violence. We use anger to bring an end to anger. We get upset to bring an end to the upset in our house, et cetera, et cetera. We use the same energy, as Einstein would put it. We use the same energy that created the problem as a means of solving the problem, even though our history for the past several thousand years has demonstrated to us that that doesn't work. There are many other areas in our life as well. We know full well, we are very clear that smoking is deleterious to your health. It's not a good thing to do. Yet you go into any public place, even today, and we see people smoking right and left, eating tons of red meat, drinking alcohol, not a little bit here and there, but on a regular basis, sometimes even overindulging. In fact, the point being that we see exactly what is so, but we do not do what works. We look right into the face of what is so, and we do exactly the opposite. And a species that was totally awakened would never, ever do that. An awakened species would never poison itself. It would never lie to itself. It would never lie to anybody else. It would never fail to share with everybody else all that there is to share, and there are many other behaviors as well that an awakened species would never undertake.
Neale, thank you so much for being here with us today. Your work has changed my life, and it's changed the lives of so many others. And I personally am glad that you dared God and you sent that book to the publisher, because it has been a gift to all of us. And so thank you for being here, for sharing your wisdom, and for spending time with us.
Well, thank you. It was lovely to be here, and thanks for the invitation. I appreciate it very much.
We'll be right back. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found the show informative. At Change Your Attitude, Change Your Life, we believe that knowledge is power. Take what you've learned, apply it, and live your best life now. Remember that the information provided are the opinions of our guests and should never replace the advice of a professional who knows your personal situation. If you'd like more information, visit our website, cyacyl.com. While on the site, listen to past shows on demand, read our digital magazine, take part in the book club, check out our team, and be sure to follow the show on social media. Until next time, this is Joan Herman. Thanks for tuning in.